David Simon's The Wire is one of the greatest shows in television history, and one of the few in recent years that really challenges the audience to think while they're watching. It's full of complex, fascinating characters and a multitude of storylines which often collide with each other in unexpected ways. And on top of that, it presents a relentlessly dark and realistic portrait of a large city and the numerous criminal and social issues that are part of it. There are few characters who can easily be labeled good and bad, so that no matter who is on screen, we're invested in them and want to see what they will do next. With one exception. During the show's fifth and final season, a whole bunch of new characters were introduced as it featured a subplot about reporters at the Baltimore Sun. Pressure was really on this season to end the show in a satisfying way while staying true to its themes, and for the most part, I think Simon and his team did a good job with that. However, the characters at the newspaper were a big mistake, and just became an albatross on the season, and even the entire show in retrospect. I have some idea of what they were trying to do with this subplot. After the first season focused entirely on the cops and the drug dealers they were trying to capture, each subsequent season added a new group of characters to expand our view of the city. Dock workers in Season 2, politicians in Season 3, and middle school students and teachers in Season 4. It seems the reporters were just meant to be the last piece of this tradition. However, the difference is, Season 5 was not about continuing the story. It was about ending the story. The show had already had over 30 major characters in numerous different locations and subplots, all of which had to be wrapped up in this season. Adding a whole bunch of new characters on top of that could never be anything but a hindrance. Maybe if the newspaper characters were interesting, it could have worked despite that, but instead we got a bunch of dull stick figures. By the end of the season, I didn't know anything more about these characters than I did when the season started, and worse, I didn't care enough about them to want to know more. I've seen some people argue that with the limited time the writers had to develop them, they would never be as interesting as the rest of the show's cast, but I don't buy that. In each of the show's first 4 seasons, I cared about every new character by episode 3 at the most, and I wanted to see more of them. But in season 5, it just didn't happen. I really felt sorry for all the actors. They get onto a show renowned for its complicated three-dimensional characters, and they get stuck with these half-finished sketches of characters no one could give a rat's ass about. And who are these characters? There's Gus Hoynes, who is Jesus, Scott Templeton, who is a liar, and the others don't even get that much characterization. Well, that's not quite true, as another character, Alma, also develops something of a character by this season's second half, but unfortunately, that character is also only being Jesus. I think what went wrong here is that David Simon was too close to his material. He was a newspaper reporter before becoming a fiction writer, and these characters are obviously based on people he actually knew, so they're all colored by either admiration or hate that's been given years to fester. There's no way he could look at this subplot from a distance, which really ended up harming it. The actual story of the subplot doesn't help either. We see early on that Templeton is fabricating the articles he's writing, and then we see Hoynes slowly start to suspect this and look for evidence that can prove it. So the entire story boils down to watching someone catch up to where we already are. I like to compare this to a certain subplot in Season 1 of Alias. Now, I'm aware that that show is nowhere near the same league as The Wire, but bear with me. The Alias character, Will Tippin, spends most of the first season slowly catching on to the fact that his friend Sidney Bristow is a spy, something the audience was aware of from episode 1. However, it works where the Wire story doesn't for 2 reasons. Will is an interesting character and Hoynes is not, and we know that his investigation will have consequences outside of his own subplot, and those consequences will continue since it's the first season and not the last. And if you can believe it, it gets worse, as we're never given any reason for why Templeton is fabricating his stories. Compare this to the scheming politician Tommy Carcetti. From the moment we see him, it's clear that his primary goal is the advancement of his own career, but it's also apparent that on some level he does genuinely care about the city and he wants to make it better. This kind of motivation could have done wonders for the Templeton character and even the whole subplot. What if he had reason to think that writing false stories would do some good for the city? But no, he's just a lying liar who likes to lie. In the last episode, it's even pointed out by another character, Jimmy McNulty, who says, and I quote, "You're just as dirty as I am, trapped in the same lie. The difference is I know why I did it. Fuck if I can figure out what it gets you in the end. I couldn't have put it better myself, and that's the real problem right there. And as bad as the story was before, the biggest insult to the audience comes in the series finale. Hoynes and Alma finally get concrete proof that Templeton is lying, but it turns out that the bosses of the newspaper only care about the Pulitzer buzz that the fake articles have created and demote them both, while Templeton goes on to win that Pulitzer. Simon even has the nerve to name-drop other reporters who fabricated stories like Jason Blair and Michael Glass. However, you may notice something about those two. The public knows that they lied because when their bosses found out about it, they didn't try to cover it up. The Wire has always been quite pessimistic about the corruption of people in authority, but here the writers took a step that just wasn't justified by reality. I love The Wire, so I hate to be this negative about it. It just really pisses me off that what should have been its grand finale had to deal with this millstone along with sending off all the characters we'd grown so invested in over the previous 4 seasons. Thankfully, the entire newspaper subplot really wasn't integrated that much with the rest of the show, so for the most part, it's pretty easy to ignore while watching the rest of the 5th season. I would have preferred it not existed at all, so we could have that much more time to say goodbye to everything the viewers actually cared about, but I'm incredibly thankful that we have The Wire in the first place, and I will continue to treasure it, warts and all.